You wake up, go through the motions, reply, "I'm good," when asked, because technically you are. There's food in the fridge, money in the bank, a roof overhead. From the outside, nothing is falling apart. And yet, inside, something is quietly unraveling. You don't feel broken, just blank. Like you're watching your life from behind a glass wall, present, but not fully alive. You laugh when you're supposed to, work when you're needed, maybe even succeed, but it all feels like acting. Like the smile you wear has become a mask you forgot how to take off. This is the pain no one prepares you for, the ache of not feeling, of being functional but emotionally absent. Not because you're weak, but because somewhere along the way you learn to survive by shutting down, to be fine instead of honest, to stay afloat instead of diving deep. But here's the truth most people miss. Emptiness isn't solved by fixing your outer life. It's an inner signal, a quiet plea from the parts of you that have been ignored, suppressed, or numbed for too long. And until you turn toward that silence, no achievement, relationship, or distraction will make it go away. Emptiness is one of the most misunderstood emotional states. People often treat it like a flaw, a sign that something is wrong with them. But in truth, emptiness isn't a personal failure. It's a message, a quiet, persistent signal from the inner world that something vital has gone unmet, unspoken, or unhealed. When you feel hollow, detached, or like you're moving through life on autopilot, it doesn't mean you're broken. It means your deeper self is trying to be heard, often after being silenced for far too long. Psychologically, this feeling shows up most often when you've spent too much time surviving instead of living. Maybe you've been focused on getting through the day, holding it all together, meeting everyone else's expectations, but neglecting your own emotional needs in the process. When your nervous system is always in manage and endure mode, your connection to joy, purpose, and self-expression gradually fades. You become efficient, responsible, even successful, but also quietly detached from your own aliveness. A major source of emptiness is disconnection from your inner needs, your truth, your body, your emotions. You might be so used to numbing, pleasing, or performing that you don't even know what you actually want anymore. You just know that life feels flat. This isn't weakness. It's a conditioned response, often shaped by early environments where emotional honesty wasn't safe or supported. Over time, you learn to survive by shutting parts of yourself down. But survival isn't the same as wholeness. And the cost of that shutdown is a slow erosion of meaning. Think of emptiness like a psychological check engine light, a warning signal, not a character flaw. It doesn't mean you failed at life. It means something inside needs attention. That might be grief you never processed, dreams you abandoned, parts of yourself you buried because they didn't fit. Emptiness is the alarm bell your psyche rings when your outer life and your inner truth are no longer aligned. And the longer you ignore it, the louder it becomes, through burnout, anxiety, or a creeping sense of emotional deadness. There's also a protective logic to feeling numb. The psyche sometimes uses emptiness as a kind of emotional anesthesia, a defense mechanism against pain that once felt too big to handle. If you've gone through loss, trauma, or chronic emotional neglect, your mind may have learned that feeling too much isn't safe, so instead it shuts down. The problem is, when you suppress pain, you also suppress joy. You can't selectively numb. And what once protected you can become a prison if left unexamined. So rather than trying to fix your emptiness, listen to it. Sit with it gently, without judgment. Ask, what part of me has gone unheard? What truth am I not living? What emotion have I buried? You may not get clear answers right away. That's okay. The goal isn't instant clarity, it's honest connection. The emptiness you feel isn't your enemy. It's your inner self knocking on the door, asking to be let back in. For many people, life slowly becomes a performance, not in the theatrical sense, but in the quiet, constant way you shape yourself to fit what others expect. You become the responsible one, the strong one, the successful one. You hit your marks, say the right things, keep it all together. But behind that polished exterior is a truth few are willing to admit. You're not really living. You're managing. You're maintaining. You're surviving behind a mask that looks like you're doing fine. This performance often begins in childhood. Maybe you learned early that love was earned through being good, not real. That approval came when you were quiet, helpful, impressive, not when you were messy, sad, or angry. Over time, this trains you to disconnect from your authentic self in order to protect relationships or avoid rejection. You become an expert in reading the room, adjusting, accommodating. But the cost? You lose touch with what you actually feel, what you actually need. The world rewards this kind of performance. Promotions, praise, likes, validation, all for showing up as the together version of yourself. But there's a loneliness in being constantly applauded for a role that isn't fully you. It feels hollow because it is. You're feeding the image, not the soul. And while the outside keeps thriving, your inner world starts to shrink, quieter, flatter, hungrier for something real. Eventually, the dissonance becomes impossible to ignore. Achievements don't satisfy. Busyness doesn't distract like it used to. You start to feel like you're watching your life from the outside, functional, but unfulfilled. This is the quiet collapse of the false self. The moment when what once kept you safe now keeps you stuck. And no matter how hard you try to push through, the emptiness grows, because deep down you know you're not being honest with yourself. You can't fill that inner void with more doing, more productivity, more applause. That's like pouring water into a bucket with no bottom. The only way out is to stop. Stop performing, stop pretending, stop abandoning your truth. This is terrifying at first, especially if your entire identity has been built on being who others needed you to be. But it's also the doorway to something radically healing, coming home to yourself. So the real question becomes, who are you when you're not performing? What do you actually want? Not what looks good or keeps others happy, but what feels true to your soul. You may not have the answer yet, but asking it honestly, courageously is how you begin to live, not just exist. One of the most painful realizations is this: you can be surrounded by people, busy with tasks, even successful by all external measures, and still feel completely disconnected from yourself. That disconnection isn't always dramatic. It often slips in quietly, over years of avoiding your inner world. You stop checking in with how you truly feel. You stop asking what you actually want. You stop noticing that your choices don't reflect your deeper self because you've learned to value function over feeling. This emotional abandonment is often subtle. You push down discomfort. You talk yourself out of your instincts. You numb rather than feel. Eventually, you forget how to tell the difference between what you truly need and what you're just used to tolerating. You become a stranger to yourself, performing routines, meeting obligations, but rarely pausing long enough to ask, is this still who I am? Is this even mine? The result is a life that works on the surface, but feels increasingly hollow underneath. You lose your emotional anchor, that felt sense of knowing what matters to you, what excites you, what breaks your heart, what makes you you. Without that inner compass, choices start to feel robotic. You go through the motions because that's what you've always done, not because it feels meaningful. Over time, you start to confuse absence of emotion with peace, but it's not peace. It's disconnection. Rebuilding that connection doesn't happen all at once. It starts with the quiet work of tuning back in, and that begins with radical honesty, the kind that's uncomfortable, even confronting. You start asking yourself real questions. What do I feel right now? Not what should I feel, but what's actually there? What am I avoiding? Where have I betrayed myself in order to keep others comfortable? You might not like the answers, that's okay. Honesty isn't always pleasant, but it is healing. As you listen more closely, you'll likely discover that many of your choices were never truly yours. They were inherited, shaped by culture, family, survival. You were trained to be agreeable, productive, self-sacrificing, but rarely encouraged to be authentic. Rediscovering yourself means unraveling those old identities, peeling them back to reveal the raw, unedited you. This is hard, sacred work. It takes time. It takes patience. But it's the only way to start feeling again, to move from numbness to aliveness. So ask yourself gently, without judgment, where have I gone silent in my own life? What truth have I been too afraid to say out loud, even to myself? Start there. Not with fixing, but with listening. That's the beginning of coming home to yourself. At some point, you stop being fooled by comfort. The job might be steady, the home might be cozy, the calendar might be full, but there's a quiet ache that hums beneath it all. It's not about what's wrong in your life. It's about what's missing. And what's missing isn't something you can buy, prove, or post. It's meaning, that deep inner sense that your life matters, that it reflects you, not just the roles you've been given. Emptiness tends to grow in the gap between comfort and purpose. You might have structure, safety, even success, but you feel spiritually underfed. Why? Because real nourishment doesn't come from achievement. It comes from alignment. When your outer life looks good, but your inner life feels hollow, it usually means you've strayed from what truly moves you. You've been feeding the body, feeding the image, feeding the routine, but not feeding the soul. You don't just need more time or rest. You need something that lights you up from the inside out. Passion, not performance. Connection, not just conversation. Creativity, not just productivity. Maybe you haven't painted in years, or danced, or wrote, or wandered in silence. Maybe you haven't had a conversation where you felt seen, really seen. The soul doesn't thrive on surface. It needs depth. And when it's deprived of that for too long, the result is the slow bleed of meaning. You may also be missing something deeper still, a sense of spiritual grounding. Not religion necessarily, but connection to something larger than yourself. A sense that your life isn't just tasks and goals and deadlines, but part of something vast, mysterious, and alive. When we lose touch with that, life becomes a series of checkboxes. You might be functioning, but you're not belonging. Not to yourself, not to others, not to the world in any sacred way. Here's the painful irony. The more empty you feel, the more tempted you are to fill it with what doesn't work. More scrolling, more spending, more working, more proving. But that's a distraction, not a cure. You're not hungry for noise, you're hungry for truth. You don't need more things, you need more you, more depth, more beauty, more experiences that reflect what you actually care about, not what you've been told should matter. So ask yourself with brutal honesty, what have I been chasing that's never satisfied me? And what have I been neglecting that quietly brings me to life? Reclaiming meaning doesn't require a life overhaul. It requires presence. One choice at a time, aligned with who you are, not who you were taught to be. That's when emptiness begins to dissolve. Not because life got louder, but because you finally got closer to yourself. Emptiness isn't a malfunction, it's the wake-up call. It's a message. When life looks fine on paper but feels lifeless inside, that's not failure. It's your deeper self finally speaking up. The numbness isn't random. It's the soul's way of saying, this version of life isn't working anymore. Not for who you really are. And here's the hardest truth. You can't outrun this feeling. You can't fix it with more doing, more earning, more pretending. Because it's not asking for more, it's asking for real. Real presence. Real purpose. Real you. If you've been living to meet expectations, to hold it all together, to be fine, of course you feel disconnected. You've been surviving someone else's idea of a life. But survival is not the same as living. So don't ignore that voice beneath the noise. It may be quiet, but it's sacred. It's asking you to stop performing, to turn inward, and to finally listen. Not to the world, not to the script, but to yourself. Your emptiness is not a problem to be shamed. It's a compass pointing you back to meaning, truth, and emotional honesty. Because fine isn't the goal. Numb isn't normal. And you weren't born to just get through the day. You were born to feel, to connect, to create, to be alive. And that starts the moment you stop abandoning yourself and start coming home.